what I'd like to point out is the hypocrisy that is coming from what I call the liberal centre. And by the way, in that liberal centre, I incorporate Rishi Sunak's Conservatives, the Liberal Democrats, and the Labour Party.
David Lammy just got absolutely wrecked on live radio, and not by a journalist, not by a political rival, but by a regular British caller who just had enough of the lies. And the worst part? Lammy thought he could talk his way out of it, but this time, his usual tactics failed. And what happened next? It changed everything.
That's really what people want. That's the extremism that I'm talking about. I think I remember my own name, David. There's no need to say Mark.
The internet blew up, with people calling it proof that politicians are completely out of touch. But was this just another viral moment, or is it a sign that voters are finally waking up? Stick around, because what we're about to break down could change everything, not just for David Lammy, but for the whole Labour Party. For years, David Lammy has built a reputation as a strong voice for progressive values, often speaking out on social justice, racism, and economic inequality. He's known as a smooth talker, skilled in debates, and comfortable in front of the media. But when a frustrated caller confronted him on live radio, he completely froze, and that moment changed everything. The caller didn't hold back, accusing Lammy and the entire political class, Conservatives, Labour, and the Liberal Democrats, of stirring up a fake culture war instead of fixing real problems.
There is a liberal establishment running this country, and at the end of the day, they do what is in their own electoral interest, which is why you've got a rampant, out-of-control culture war that we've had.
His argument was that there's no real difference between red and blue politics anymore.
Because as far as I'm concerned...
You would describe Rishi Sunak's Conservatives as liberal?
Yes. Yes, I don't believe in this division between Team Red, Team Blue. As far as I'm concerned, there is a liberal establishment running this country, and at the end of the day, they do what is in their own electoral interest.
Instead, the UK is run by an elite that looks out for itself while everyday people struggle with rising costs, immigration issues, and crime, problems that never seem to get solved. The most brutal part is that Lammy had no real response. He was visibly caught off guard as the caller tore into the hypocrisy of modern British politics.
What I'd like to point out is the hypocrisy that is coming from what I call the liberal centre. And by the way, in that liberal centre, I incorporate Rishi Sunak's Conservatives, the Liberal Democrats, and the Labour Party.
One of the biggest points the caller made was that the UK's culture war isn't just happening by accident. It's being used as a distraction from real issues like the cost of living crisis, failing public services, unchecked immigration policies, and rising crime rates. And this isn't just some random theory. Many political analysts have pointed out that both Labour and the Conservatives benefit from keeping these culture war debates alive. While people argue over gender policies, statues, and woke versus anti-woke battles, the real power structures remain untouched. In fact, most Britons believe politicians exploit culture wars as a political strategy. We saw this at the October 2023 Conservative conference in Manchester, where ministers leaned into divisive social issues. Home Secretary Suella Braverman warned that Britain would go properly woke if Keir Starmer won the next election, and even claimed a hurricane of migrants was on the way. And then Prime Minister Rishi Sunak threw himself into the whole transgender rights debate because, of course, nothing says fixing the country like weighing in on another culture war. Let's be real, these aren't just random comments. They're deliberate plays to fire up the right-wing base. The word woke, which originally meant being aware of racism and social injustice, has basically been twisted into an insult. Now, it's just a catch-all phrase for stuff certain politicians don't like. So, these were the very issues the caller brought up.
A lot of people in this country are sick and tired of it. A lot of people in this country, I think, want to return to normality where, yes, it's okay completely to be gay, to be whatever you want to be, to believe whatever religion you want to believe, but don't infringe on the rights of other people.
Okay. But let's be honest, there's another side to this. Some argue that these so-called culture war issues actually matter because they shape British values and identity. And for David Lammy, this moment wasn't just embarrassing, it was damaging. Lammy has built a reputation as one of Labour's biggest voices and one of the most vocal key figures in government. But this call exposed something critics have been pointing out for a while: he struggles to defend his party's contradictions. And instead of giving clear answers, he tends to pivot to scripted talking points. And this isn't the only time Lammy would face backlash on his vocal abilities. His recent takes on international issues like Ukraine-Russia and Israel-Gaza wars has also caused several backlashes. Take his speech on the third anniversary of the Ukraine war, for example. He called Putin's invasion a monumental failure and pushed for seizing Russian assets, something more European leaders are considering.
Europe has to act quickly, and I believe we should move from freezing assets to seizing assets.
And Lammy even made it clear that Putin must be held accountable, stating,
The UK will not let up on justice, and Putin should pay in terms of his accountability, not the British and European people.
And in early February, he took things a step further. His visit came just weeks after Prime Minister Keir Starmer vowed that the UK would play its full part in securing peace. During his trip, Lammy met with President Zelensky and announced a £55 million aid package to support Ukraine's energy sector, grain exports, and social services.
Today, standing here with my friend, the Ukrainian Foreign Minister, Andrei Sybiha, the UK is showing our support to Ukraine is ironclad. We will help keep the lights of Ukraine on in the face of Putin's aggression.
Right now, the UK and France are talking with NATO about setting up a security force in Ukraine if a peace deal is reached. But that's a huge risk. Ukraine isn't part of NATO, so sending troops could lead to a direct confrontation with Russia. But Lammy's support for Ukraine isn't new. It goes back months, even before his recent visit.
About talks. We must not forget that Russia's barbaric war goes on. That Ukrainian people are suffering, and beyond Europe, the conflict is piling pressure on the world's poorest too.
In September 2024, he urged Western allies to show nerve and fortitude as Ukraine pushed for permission to fire long-range Western missiles into Russia. At a Labour Party conference event, Lammy stood alongside Ukraine's ambassador to the UK, Valerii Zaluzhnyi, who stressed the importance of lifting these restrictions. According to Zaluzhnyi, being able to strike Russian targets was critical to defending Ukrainian civilians.
You know that we will continue to stand alongside you to fight this imperialism that we're seeing from Putin until the very end.
Right now, Ukraine already has long-range missiles from the UK, US, and France, but here's the catch: they can only use them within Ukraine's borders. Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine began in February 2022, Ukrainian cities and frontline positions have been under constant bombardment. Many of these attacks come from missiles launched by Russian aircraft deep inside Russia, yet Ukraine isn't allowed to strike the bases where these bombers take off. President Zelensky has repeatedly pleaded with Western allies to lift these restrictions, arguing that it severely limits Ukraine's ability to defend itself.
There should be no restrictions on the range of weapons for Ukraine, while terrorists have no such restrictions. Defenders of life should face no restrictions on weapons, while Russia uses all kinds of its own weapons, as well as Shahed drones and ballistic missiles from North Korea. The United States, the United Kingdom, France, and other partners have the power to help us.
But Russia's Vladimir Putin has warned that allowing Ukraine to strike inside Russian territory would be seen as direct participation in the war by the West. So far, Ukraine's allies, especially the UK, US, and France, have hesitated to take that step, worried about escalating tensions and risking direct confrontation with Moscow. Now, Lammy is being loud and clear on Ukraine, calling for more support, pushing allies to lift restrictions, and even delivering millions in aid. The general UK's political landscape support for Ukraine has been on another level since the Labour Party took office. In fact, one of Keir Starmer's first big moves as Prime Minister was signing a 100-year partnership agreement with Ukraine during his visit in January. That's right, 100 years of deeper security ties and stronger relations between the two countries. This agreement isn't just symbolic, it actually sets up military collaboration, particularly on maritime security, covering key areas like the Baltic Sea, Black Sea, and Azov Sea. The goal? Deter Russian aggression and keep Ukraine's defenses strong.
If Russia is serious about a lasting peace that respects Ukraine's sovereignty, Ukraine's independence, and the United Nations Charter, guarantees Ukraine's security against future aggression, rejects imperialism, then Britain will listen.
But here's where things get tricky. While the UK has been vocal about Ukraine, critics say it's been way softer on Gaza. Lammy has supported a two-state solution and condemned Israeli settlement expansions, but for many, that's not enough. And here's where public opinion is shifting fast. Massive protests have erupted across the UK, and polls show over half of Brits now support ending arms sales to Israel. This isn't just about Lammy, it's about the entire political system. People don't just dislike politicians, they don't trust them. And let's be real, trust is hard to rebuild once it's broken. The scandals, the broken promises, the constant dodging, it all adds up. Voters feel unheard, betrayed, and lied to. And when an ordinary person calls into a radio show, they're not just asking for clarification, they're demanding accountability. When a high-profile politician like Lammy can't provide a straight answer, it confirms what many already believe, that politicians are more interested in protecting their careers than solving real problems.
That's really what people want. That's the extremism that I'm talking about. I think I remember my own name, David. There's no need to say Mark.
They stick to scripted responses, dodge direct answers, and act like people don't notice. But they do, and they're sick of it. This is why traditional politicians are losing ground. Voters are ditching the mainstream parties in favor of outsiders, people who actually listen. We saw it with Brexit, the rise of Reform UK, and the growing support for independent candidates who challenge the establishment. Some voters are even checking out entirely because they feel like no one represents them. So, what now? Will Labour and every other party actually learn from this? Will they start being real with the public? Or will they just hope this all blows over? If history tells us anything, they'll ignore the warning signs. They'll assume people will forget, move on, and keep voting the same way. David Lammy thought he could control the narrative. But this call exposed the truth, and the people aren't buying the excuses anymore. The question now isn't just about Lammy, it's about every politician in Britain. Do they actually listen, or are they just waiting for the next election? Let us know what you think in the comments, and if you think people need to hear this, hit share now before this gets buried.